Lian, and I graduated in 2010 and joined farm for about a good decade or so. And I took a sabbatical to kind of explore my own and do my little own projects since. What sparked your decision to study architecture? I grew up with an art background, so I think it wasn't like an ambition that I wanted to do since I was a kid, but it was more like I wanted to do something that was design related. Hence, I think it was by elimination that I ended up choosing architecture. 3 words to describe your time as an architecture student, and 3 words to describe your time as an architect. 3 words. I think 2 of it is repeated as a student and as an architect now. So the first 2 words is intense. It's rewarding, and as a student it's a sprint. What I mean by that is that you have a project and it's a sprint to the finish line, and then you get to relax in your holidays. Whereas as an architect now, it's still intense, still rewarding, but I think the change is it's now a marathon. You have no definite timeline. You don't have your April submission and then you are on holidays. As an architect, you have many projects crossing at different stages, and I think the important difference is that you have to pace yourself like a marathon. As a current design lecturer at NUS, what is the biggest difference you have observed between the architecture education now and then? I think the greatest difference, if I can remember as a student and now, is that more resources are readily available for the generation now. So everything you can have is available. Remember, last time as a student we don't have Google Earth, so if we need to do site models, we literally have to climb up to adjacent building to look at the roof, whereas now you can just click Google Earth. So I think to me that's the greatest difference, and maybe a little bit more complex are your projects now compared to as I remember last time.
It seems like you enjoy teaching. Is there a reason why you decide to teach?
How I got into teaching wasn't so much like I really wanted to teach. It was more like I think at my 5th year mark into working as a full-time architecture designer, I thought maybe why don't I try something still related to architecture but something different. So I was fortunate enough to start out at Singapore Poly and then moved on to NUS, and what I realized the joy of it was I get to experiment and work on different design projects that are maybe not bogged down by your day-to-day client requirement or budget or cost. I get to try crazy ideas, I think, and the conversations with students, I think that's, to me, essential in keeping me sane. Yeah, because if every day I'm just dealing with people and all sorts of kind of practical issues, that it can be quite stifling sometimes. So when I get to go to studio and then talk with students and then try this, try that, I think that to me excites me a lot. Yeah, so that's why I am fortunate to be still in the teaching part of the practice. Yeah. Based on your experience, what do you think is the most important thing students should take away from their architecture education? I think the most important thing, a few things, is to be inquisitive, be deliberate, and be thoughtful. I think with these 3 traits, it should get you beyond just being an architect. It covers more than just being an architect. And I think there's no right and wrong answer lah. So architecture trains you to the way we see things around us. So I think as long as we can get that mindset in mind, I think that's the important thing to take away from the education itself. Do you have a personal design philosophy, and how has this affected your design direction? I don't think I have a personal design philosophy per se, but I approach a design project in 2 prongs. Right, firstly is a very kind of logical manner, so that you deal with addressing client's need, responding to the brief as well as the site. And then the other approach, which is something more creative, is what I try to inject in each project. So every new project I pursue, I try to have at least something different between each project. It could be the way spaces are being arranged. It could be experimenting with new geometry. It could be a new different material. So I think it's only like my personal thing lah. Like nobody will know that it's something new. But as my own personal agenda, each project I try to experiment with something new. So I guess that keeps me delighted in each project. So you have the very logical approach to addressing a project. Then the creative part is when I experiment with something. And of course, the tough part is trying to convince clients when you have certain quirkiness in your design. So I think that is probably the challenge lah. Okay, other than being an architect, do you have other pursuits outside of architecture? How did you manage to juggle these pursuits? Okay, other than being an architect, I teach at NUS as a tutor in the studios. I teach yoga as well as part-time during the weekends, and I also do paint as much as I can. I think my students will kind of remember every time when we have a first studio session, I will ask each and every one what are their interests beyond architecture, because I feel that it's important for everyone to still hold on to this and not be too sucked into this idea that your life is consumed by architecture. And I think it's important because I term these hobbies or pursuits as active rest. You actively do something so that you rest the mind that is always tackling architecture, and I think that's important to sustain the grueling architecture feel. Yeah.
Juggling between your career and other pursuits, do you have sufficient sleep?
Do you see my dark eye rings? I would say most of the time I get sufficient sleep, and I think it's inevitable that you will have period of times as a student and as an architect that you need to rush their timelines, and you sometimes have certain urgent matters to attend to. So not all the time, but I think it's important to rest and get enough sleep. And I think luckily I'm the kind that anywhere, anytime also can sleep. So I get rest as much as I can.
In this case, do you have any tips for those who are struggling to find this balance?
I think everyone has very different idea of what a balance is, and I would say trial and error. See, for me also it's constantly when I first started working as well. It was quite a steep learning curve, and then I was hit by a little burnout. So then that's when I really started to recalibrate. So I think it's always a active thing to do is to recalibrate your life. If suddenly you feel like something's off balance, just spend some time to think about how do you prioritize. I think even as a student you prioritize different pursuits as well, and you probably get better at this juggling thing. Yeah. Architecture has always been stereotyped as a male-dominated industry. However, the student gender ratio at NUS is seemingly equal. Based on your experience, is this ratio also observed in the current working industry? Yeah, I must say that I think it's still pretty much male-dominated, but I think I've worked with a good mix of both. Increasingly so as well. Like my consultant team, there's a fair mix of female representative, even in the contractors team as well. So I think observation of the ratio maybe is I think it's still pretty much male dominated, but I think to be in this field, as long as we are being treated equal, you treat everyone equally as well, I think it's fine. Yeah, doesn't matter. Have you ever regretted going into architecture? Can I say no? Well, I think to be honest, sometimes you get waves of this feeling of being regretful, but I think being in it, I have not regretted doing architecture, because it has taught me how to see the world, how to be sensitive to the built and non-built environment. And I think beyond school, designing and crafting is exciting and fun, but often the challenging part is dealing with people. Yeah, so as an architect, you got to wear many different hats. You got to, because in school, you just, as a student, you deal with your tutor, which is essentially in the real world will be like your client, right? So you just deal with answering to your tutor or your client. But in realizing a project, you have to know how to deal with your authorities, how to seek advice from them, how to consolidate your consultant team, how to work together. Then you have to wear another hat when dealing with workers on site as well, the contractors, and then of course to your clients. So I think, to me, that itself is very delicate, and often, maybe to me, the challenging part of the profession is to deal with people. Yeah. Clients, I think when they come to you, they expect you to address whatever needs they have. So I think there was this one particular project many years ago. This client, of course, we had many rounds of design exploration, and I think at some point during the discussion, she didn't quite see what I was trying to do. I was creating void spaces and skylights here and there. It took some convincing, because some of the spaces weren't very practical per se. It took some convincing to push through the idea, but she was quite receptive on the project. And then when the house was built and she moved in, and everything was okay, nothing, no major hiccups. And then one fine day, she texted me with some photos, and she told me, oh, I came back that day and I saw the light coming through the skylight through the stairs, and she realized how beautiful the space was. Then she said she finally understood what I was trying to do. So that was, to me, the most rewarding part of the project, is when I guess the clients get to see the same vision that you have for the project. I think we might not be so lucky in all clients. Sometimes you do things and then you own self shook, then you can say, oh, it's just very nice. But when the clients get to appreciate this alongside you, I think that's quite rewarding. Yeah. What is one piece of advice you would give to all architecture students out there now? I think not so noble to give one piece of advice, but what I feel is that whenever you're given a challenge or there are interesting projects, I would say just take it. Even you do not do, you take it and figure out how to do it later on, because I think there's value in finding out how to do things beyond what you know how to do. And then I think this attitude can take you far when you go beyond school, because a lot of unknown out there. If you stick to what you already know, then you're limiting yourself. And if you open yourself to more challenges, I think it's okay to fail. Yeah, you learn from it. Yeah.
Regarding burnout periods, how do you deal with burnout?
I think you don't have a point where, oh, like a cut, you have bleeding, then that's burnout. I think burnout is a slow build up when you suddenly realize that you are dreading what you're doing. You have questions about what you're doing. Is it relevant, or do you want to still do this? So to me, I think that's like a leading to a breaking point, or maybe a burnout point. So to me, I've had such moments throughout my decade or so. And how I deal with it is usually through talking with my peers. And I find that by talking and by sharing, a lot of times the problem you realize isn't so big after all. Maybe it's just one little part that you're so myopic that you don't see it. And to me, by talking through with people, you kind of realize, what is the main issue, and then maybe you try to solve that problem, and then see how whether that adjusts your mindset. So that, I guess that's how you deal with it. There isn't like a one-stop solution. You go somewhere, suddenly your burnout is solved. I think when you reach that point, it's really about maybe fine-tuning what's important, what is misaligned, and what is things that you can adjust to deal with it. So yeah, I guess that's how I deal with it lah. Where y'all take this question for? Like, people submit questions.
I would like to be an A student, but I don't know how. Are there any traits or habits that you observe an A student usually exhibit?
There's no like a formula to that, and I would say to be an outstanding student is to have solutions or creative input beyond what your tutor's feedback is. So when doing consultations, when we discuss ideas, I think most of the time students will react to tutors' comments or feedbacks. But I think the exceeding expectations, students will go beyond it, do further research, and come back to the table with more than what was being asked for. I think that's a good start, I guess. As to whether it translates to being A, I think it's really how you put everything together lah. Yeah.
How come I see architects only wearing black and white? Is it some inside thing that I don't know about?
I was told wearing black makes me slim. Okay, on a more personal take on this, I did realize that when I first started working, I was a lot more colourful in my clothing, and then now it's all really all black or monochrome. And I come to think of it, I feel it's because day to day I have lots of decisions to make. Every single detail or everything we do requires a certain level of decision making, and increasingly so as you progress. So to eliminate the decision making in my daily lives, to cut at least save my brain space on that, everything just black, then I don't have to decide every day what to wear, right? So that's why it became black. It's not like black is cool. Yeah.
I mean, it's quite cool. What is one thing you would change about the industry?
I think one thing I would hope to see is for the general public to know what we do, the entire extent of the responsibility an architect hold on to. Because a lot of, you walk down the street and ask anyone, what do they know what an architect does? They say, oh, just draw only, right? So I think because of that very limiting idea of what an architect does, naturally it translates to how they value architects, how they pay architects, because they don't see the extent of responsibility that we hold. So I hope, I don't know how, that this kind of extent of what we do is being known to the public law. Yeah.
Do you think architects are compensated enough for the amount of work they put in?
No. I think it gets easier. Yeah, you get more experience, but I think the amount of effort is still there. You can't disregard the responsibility that we hold. So I think hope to, I mean, we all hope, right, to get more, but I think we'll try, I guess, to see how we can change the mindset, and how, I guess, it starts with how the public value us lah. Then I think we can change from there. Yeah.
How often does a project with good graphics correlate to good grades?
Yeah, I have a very easy solution to know whether an archi project is good. Look at the physical model as well, because I think a lot of times, sometimes you can do magic to your renders, to do magic to your graphic, but if your model, it shows unresolved design, or something that it's not in par with what you have shown graphically, then I think that tells lah. So that's why I think model is as equal as a weightage in the overall presentation package as much as the graphic. Yeah, because you can really hide a lot of things in graphic, but as a model you can't. You have to resolve it, and even resolving it in a very nice manner, it requires a certain level of competency. So I think usually I will look at both. Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Bonus.
Still got
So
it.
just carry on as you go.
Yeah.
Why do you wear 2 watches?
Oh, this I like this kind of analog design watch, but I have a Fitbit, so I don't know what to give up. I need a Fitbit to track my sleep, to track my steps, to track my exercise, but I like the design of this better. Yeah. To get you one that's both. That's both now.
The Apple Watch isn't good
Yeah.
for reason.
But the analog though.
No, but you don't have this,
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, you don't have clicking and some.
Yeah, and I don't want too much technology on my hand. I don't want to get WhatsApp notification on my hand. Yeah, so
The 2 bottles?
2 bottles. One is for water, one is for coffee.
Oh.
Okay.
Do you think the Fitbit helps with your work-life balance?
Whether Fitbit, I'm not selling.
Maybe after this you'll get sponsored.
I think no. But it's nice to see what my sleep quality is. Like on days when I wake up very tired, I'll be like, did I sleep well? Yeah. But it's not so much the reverse, whether this will affect. It's more like me doing whatever I do, then track and see what it was. Not yeah.
Piece of affirmation.
Yeah. Actually, I can do away without. It was also like, you know, the insurance have like the steps, you clock how many steps. Yeah, not bad lah.
Okay, hi! If you like this video, please follow us on Instagram and
Like you feel free to comment down below on who you like us to interview next.
yay! This is my third date, guys.